first things first, in order to escape the matrix that we're in, the current operating system, which is the physical dimension that we live in, and we're not talking about escape as in death, because that's going to come anyways. We're talking about periodically transcending the matrix that we live in, the operating system, that we can get back in touch with the truth of who we are and what we are and why we're here to begin with. So before we get to how that works and the codes that the Torah gives us in order to do that, first we need to understand, according to Judaism, what is the matrix itself. Okay? And one of the things we're going to learn is that the matrix always consists of numbers. Anything by which you have to rely and depend on number or a number system, that is part of the matrix. That is the operating system right there. Going into the cyber world, that whole programming design is based on numbers, okay? But so is the matrix that we're living in right here, this model of reality. So for example, everything is based on numbers, okay? The government knows you by a number. The government does not know you by a name. It wants your number. What is your social security number? What is your government ID number? What is your driver's license number? Right? Your birth certificate probably has a number. Everything has, your passport has a number. We determine the weather by a number system. We determine what we can buy and what we can afford by our monthly budgets, by the numbers we see in our bank accounts. We determine whether we're gaining and losing on the stock market by looking at numbers and their patterns. We go for entertainment. We go to basketball games. The Lakers just won this week, the playoffs, by a system of numbers. A person decides whether they need to gain weight or lose weight when they get on the scale to measure numbers. Our credit cards work on numbers, and God forbid we should ever go to a cashless society. Now we're going to be tied literally to a grid of numbers. Right? We have GPS coordinates to determine where we can be found. We are literally trapped living in a matrix, but we need the number and the number systems and the number patterns in order to function, in order to measure reality. So what we're not saying the numbers is a bad system. It's a necessary system, but it is an operating system. It is a matrix, and the Torah basically warns us. When you take a census of the Israelites to count them, each one must pay the Lord a ransom for his life at the time he is counted. Then no plague will come on them when you number them. Here is a second source of the danger of turning people into numbers and counting them. And David's heart condemned him after he had numbered the people. So David said to the Lord, I have sinned greatly in what I have done, but now I pray, O Lord, take away the iniquity of your servant, for I have done very foolishly. Until this day, Orthodox Jews, or keepers of the Torah, do not count other Jews directly. It is prohibited. The Torah has always been against reducing people to numbers. Our sages explain that it attracts calamity, plague, misfortune, and even death. In the 20th century, taken it into an extreme, we saw what had resulted when reducing people into numbers. Here you can even see the great evil giving numbers to children. And the Torah basically warns us about living only in a world of numbers. Because what happens when we do, we lose perspective. We lose our heads. We lose our way. And so now we're going to look at the text in the book of Numbers for further instruction. So here we are in the book of Numbers, the very first one or two verses in the book of Numbers, and God is already commanding Moses to take a number, to take a census, to collect the numbers of eligible adult men between the ages of 20 and 60 that are capable to be part of a military force. And that is to determine the strength of the military force of the children of Israel, because that is the reality while living here in this world. So now, while God understands the necessity of living in a world of numbers in order to measure physical reality, in order to function successfully in physical reality, while God understands this, God also understands the dangers. So he gives us, in the same verse where he commands Moses to take a census and to start working out serious numbers, in the same verse, he gives us the code of how to escape the matrix. It's really unbelievable. Okay, so now in order to crack this code, the first thing we need to do is we need to look at the Hebrew. The Hebrew is an essential key to unlocking this code. So in the English, in verse 2, it reads, "Take a census of the whole Israelite community by their clans and families, listing every man by name one by one." The interesting thing is that in the Hebrew, it doesn't say to count or to come to a census or to come to a sum total conclusion. In the Hebrew, it literally says, "Se'u et rosh kol adat Yisrael." Okay? "Se'u et rosh" means to lift the head. So literally translating from the Hebrew into English is lift the head instead of count. And the question that all the rabbis are asking is, why didn't God just say count? Right? Tispor et rosh kol adat Yisrael. Tispor means to count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Why does it say to raise the head? And so that's because it's a code. And what is the code? We have to look at it very, 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 very closely. Lift, that means go up. The word Rosh itself. To take the word Rosh, especially its 3 letters. The 3 letters are Resh, Aleph, and Shin. Take the 3 letters of Rosh and go to the next letter up in the alphabet for each letter. That means if it's Resh, you go up to Shin. The next letter, Aleph, raise up. Aleph becomes Bet, the next corresponding letter in the Hebrew alphabet. And finally, Shin of the word Rosh. Raise it, go up, and you have the letter Taf. What does the 3 raised letters spell? The word Shabbat, the Sabbath. And so now the question becomes, what does Sabbath, what does Shabbat have to do with the raising of the heads of Bnei Israel, the children of Israel? So let's go back into the matrix for a moment. We know that when we live in a world of numbers, whether those numbers are army numbers, war numbers, voting for the next president, epidemic health concern numbers, the measurements that we of our bank accounts, any of that, there's a point where if you only live in a world of numbers, you start to lose the plot. You start to lose the purpose. You start to lose perspective. You start to lose your head. And so in the very same place where God is telling us to use numbers, he's also telling us an escape strategy of how to escape this matrix of numbers by which we can literally lose our way. And to re-find our way, to get perspective again, to not lose our head, Shabbat is the key. That's why God says, raise the heads of Israel. Don't lose your heads, raise the heads. That's why God doesn't simply say count. Raise the head, because you're going to get to the antidote to the illness of losing your head. You're going to get to the word Shabbat. What is Shabbat? Shabbat is taking a step back from it all. Shabbat is regaining perspective. Shabbat is unplugging from the matrix, detaching, taking a step back that you could see the wider view of the whole game plan. When you're able to step back, you're able to see things clearly for what it is. When God created the world, he created the world in 7 stages, right? 6 stages plus the Sabbath. After every day stage of his creation, God himself took a step back. It says that God looked upon all that he had created and he determined its value, whether it was good or not, right? On each day that God created, it says, and he saw what he had created, what he had done, and it was good. When he created a human being, he said it was very good. Right? God had confidence and faith in us. How much more so should we step back from living in the matrix of numbers, living in these number systems? How much more so do we need to take a step back and we need to regain perspective? So what happens on Shabbat? It's not just a day of rest. It's not just a day of just physical rest or even spiritual rest. It's regaining our head, regaining our perspective, regaining a healthy orientation, and reorienting ourselves to the higher reality and the higher truth of why we are all here. It's sitting at a table, literally face to face with our loved ones. Time is short. Time is fleeting. Everything in this world is temporary. At some point, we need to sit back and look at the people who we love, who we appreciate, who have meaning and give us purpose in this world. That's our children, that's our parents, that's our extended family, that's our community and our circle of friends. We get back in touch with each other as people. We get back in touch with ourselves. And we get back in touch and reconnect to the source who brought us into this wonderful world of creation to begin with. And we regain our heads. And thank God we have a formula in the book of Numbers, in the very second verse, of how to escape the necessary matrix called the physical world that we currently occupy. Today I release all numerical systems and digital codes which would limit me from growing into the full expression of spirit that I strive to be. I understand that I am a spiritual being, and as such I partake of the divine wisdom available. I allow the spiritual qualities of my oneness with God to lift me above the matrix and into a greater and wider perspective. Please do subscribe so we can keep in touch.